The Education Lounge podcast.
We're joined with a couple of lovely people. We have Katherine here and Juber, if that's your real name.
That is my real name.
And they've been teaching. Catherine's fairly new to the profession.
New. Yeah.
And then we've had Juber's been doing it for a while
now.
Part of the furniture.
Pretty much, basically.
Yeah, we're quite excited because we've been trying to get them onto obviously they're quite busy. They want their holidays as well, whenever they can. So, yeah, it's a real privilege to talk to them.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Been trying to get you on here for a while, so half term seems to be a good time.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with Katherine?
Yeah.
So you're really new into the profession.
6 months into my first ECT year. So if anyone's not familiar with sort of how it works now in your first teaching years, it used to be an NQT year, which was 1 year. And now it's spread over 2 years. So I'm in my first ECT year, first year of teaching.
And how are you finding it?
There are obviously it's very rewarding. Love my class. Love certain days. There are moments where it can be completely overwhelming. It's very much been thrown in the deep end in lots of ways, compared to your training year, which I think you are quite protected from certain things.
Yeah.
But it's been a massive learning curve, just quite overwhelming at times. But yeah, I've been doing well at it. So I mean, yeah, it's been a lot to learn, but it's good. Yeah.
And then just question I've got. So if you have just tell me about a standard day in the life of a primary school teacher.
You do a vlog
for you.
So I teach a mixed year group, which is year 3 and 4 combined. So that was a big learning curve for me. Obviously having to learn the different levels within a class anyway is a big task.
Yeah.
But then to have obviously children who range from 7 years old to 9 years old with different learning abilities is really tricky. So typical day, I get into work probably about 8 o'clock. I'm not an early. I'm probably the first one there, to be honest, actually, but that's quite late, I think.
That is quite late. Yeah.
Quite late. I think some teachers do get into work about 7, really, really early.
So after 2 coffees, 3
coffees, 3
4
espressos, 3 double espressos. Yeah, so I get into work, but I am very much I want everything. On Friday, I leave my school with my work printed, all resources made. I don't leave anything. I'm very organised and OCD when it comes to things like that. So I want to leave on a Friday night knowing I'm ready for the week ahead. I'm not a last minute person when it comes to, so I want to get into work at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Load my classroom, tidy my classroom, copy, trim, and then I'm ready. Whereas I think some people do prep in the morning. I don't know. There's different teachers out there. So I think it's whatever works for you.
Yeah, of course you do.
Yeah, I think whatever works for you. But for me, I'm very much a week before.
Yeah, I can imagine you being that way.
Yeah, I annoy myself sometimes because I'm just very I need this done. And make sure everything's organised. Yeah. So yes, then it depends on your school timetable, I suppose, but we do a comprehension every single morning. I welcome the children in, comprehension, give any messages out, English, maths, obviously non-negotiables before lunch, and then the afternoon it will very, very much be like a PE or a topic-based subject. And then we do clubs after school. So I run a sports club, and then obviously you then got marking to do, but I try my best to get away from school and switch off from school by at least 5 o'clock every day.
Do you manage it?
Do manage it, yeah. Yeah, do try to manage it. Sometimes I have to take work home with me, or if it just depends on the day. There is normally days where something pops up, like if you got PPA afternoon, like there might be a parent who needs to speak to you, or something pops out of somewhere, or a child is unsettled in your class you need to deal with. Sometimes you don't get your planning time, so then you might need to work at home or on a weekend, basically. So yeah, don't think you ever really switch off.
There's a lot of unbilled hours.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's interesting because I've been teaching for a long time, obviously, but I'm still taking work home. I still haven't found that work-life balance.
I don't think you can get it.
You don't really switch off.
It's not even that you switch off because marking, I don't know what your marking policy is, but we've got to mark a lot of books on a daily basis. And there's literally no time in school. Before school is setting up, after school is setting up meetings, meeting with parents and meeting with their teacher and stuff. But I tend to take a lot of planning home. I get PPA. My PPA literally is not planning. I don't plan anything during PPA. I'm always meeting someone or making phone calls, or there's always something I've got to be doing. There's always other things I'm doing. So I never get to plan in school. I can't remember the last time
you did planning in school.
Yeah, literally. So
you teach
Year 6. So I teach Year 6. Yeah, I teach Year 6 and a part of SOT as well in my current school. But like, I'm still taking work home. I'm taking a lot less work home, I've got to be honest, but I'm still taking work home. And I find it interesting that even in my school, there's a lot of teachers that come in later than me and leave earlier than me. And I kind of think, am I doing something wrong, or are they doing something wrong? Because I can't understand how they could be getting out so early and I'm still there doing the work and still taking work home. But anyways, I don't know. Are
those teachers who have been there the same time as you, or are they like newer teachers?
Some of them are newer teachers, and some of them are not. I've been teaching a long time, so there's a lot of staff there that are not.
Your SLT as well, so you've got a lot of big responsibilities. Yeah. It's one of those. I think you have. It all depends on it's day-to-day basis, and from school to school. I think like there's some weeks where I get to do all my planning in my PPA. But then there'll be other weeks where I Sunday morning doing all my planning, doing my PPA basically on a Sunday morning for the week ahead. So I think it just depends. Like in my current school, I don't know, again, your school and other schools, you don't have LSAs as much, or teaching assistants as much anymore. So there is more pressure on teachers to do the marking and things like that, to do everything like the trimming, the printing, the copying, all those little things, the laminating, those all take a long time. And even those things being on your to-do list, are obviously sometimes not priority, but there is always a to-do list, which I think me probably being naive going into teaching, like I said, I'm very much like, I want my to-do list done.
So one thing I've learned is you can never finish the to-do list.
No.
It's the same with everything. It's the same here as well.
Yeah.
Just ongoing.
Yeah. But I think it's because we care as well. Like I care about, I want to give my best for every lesson. Like I want to make sure it's not some lessons are boring, but that's inevitable. Not every lesson can be exciting. But, I try and put my best into everything, and whether that's sustainable over years and years and years of teaching, I don't know. And I think that's where I've sort of learnt a big lesson in my first term as a teacher, that actually it's not sustainable to be that.
Because you've been obviously in school for a long time, surely after like 10 years, you more or less know
what you're doing,
you've taught, like I've taught decimals so many times. I know how I've got my approach, and I've got something that I like to use for this class, and I found it to be successful in the past, and thus you can minimize some of your planning because you've done some of that.
Definitely the planning is reduced, but the problem is they keep changing the curriculum, they keep changing the expectations, and the school will change the scheme of work they're following, their support. So some are planning that I've got planning going back years, right? And I can always dip in and dip out. But where they change the scheme of work, or where they change the expectations or the layout of the planning, we've got planning templates now. So it's a case of copying and pasting and finding it. And it almost like, because you've got so much planning, it becomes like a Google search almost. So you look for decimals and you've got like 10 hits for decimal. You're like, oh, which one did I use now? Because you're always changing it for every class. You're always changing it every year. You're always changing, adapting it. And the thing I love about new teachers, they've got so much flair. Like that kind of dies down a little bit. It does that. They're so motivated.
So keen at the beginning, and then
they're so eager. They want to make everything enjoyable. They want to get hundreds of resources. I'm ready to walk in there with a whiteboard pen and a flip chart. Let's go.
And that was something that fed back to me quite early on. Was like, I have to, as an ECT and a first year teacher, I have to remember that I am new, so there is going to be more work or pressure on myself in the first couple of years because, you know, someone who's got 5 years experience will have literally a backlog, like a diary in their head of like, okay, I need you to go into this classroom now and teach fractions, and they will just know exactly how to do it, what works, what doesn't work. Whereas I would want to go and like plan the whole thing, and then like you know.
Yeah.
So are these?
So it's just
aside from like curriculum,
I suppose.
Aside from like curriculum changes, is also like schools having a certain approach that you need to follow and them changing it up, or. So
this is what I mean when I say scheme of work. So we're doing white roles at the moment, and we're now transitioning. We're transitioning to NCETM. So that's a completely different structure, completely different layout. So my white roles planning from last year will kind of become redundant because NCTM is very much the way they lay it out is very pictorial, very very step by step. So my white roles planning will become useless, and I have to now go to the NCTM website, follow their links, follow their resources, download their things, and use that into books once that transition happens. So all that planning I did last year.
Yeah, but then doesn't that just like it kind of unsettles everything because for teachers and students alike? Because if you're changing your approach to
it definitely does. But then this is what happens with leadership, right? So you see like a reading scheme. We've got I can't remember what it's called now, but we got one reading scheme, and that's changed over the last 2 years. So it hasn't fed through from Key Stage 1, and nothing stays long enough for it to kind of travel all the way through it, because you don't see the impact of it. And when you get new members of staff in, so you got a new literacy lead, and they come in fresh, they're like, oh yeah, now I want to do this scheme. I've seen it work at my school, and they're like, this is the proven track record. And the head teacher is like, okay, then yeah, go for it. Let's give it a chance. And then 2 years later, that teacher leaves. Another teacher comes in and say, oh wait, my school does this scheme, and you're like, oh come on, come on, we just set this up.
Surely they can like test the success of a particular scheme. So they go, okay, well, this one seems to be working well. Like statistically, I don't know, student marks are up this much, and
so yeah, certain things become embedded, certain things stay. But actually, because cohorts are very different. What works for 1 year group, what scheme has been working. And when it gets to year 6, and you're like, hold on a second, like, well, I did a scheme called Destination Reader, right, which was a reading scheme, and it's a lot of speaking and listening, a lot of talking, and it develops their comprehension skills. But in year 6, you're like, hold on a second, they're talking a lot, but when you present them with a question, they can't answer that question. So what do? We need to do something different in year 6. And it's like, why would you do something in year 6 if it's been following through? But that kind of pressure falls onto the head teacher say, my 6s can't answer a question. SATs are coming in 3 months. What are we going to do? Let's mix it up. I suppose they get scared. They make changes. I don't know.
I sometimes find that like there's like, for instance, with mathematics, sometimes you notice that, so a year 6 student like commonly have trouble with fractions, percentages, and decimals, and those. It's often those things. But I'm like, there is an easy way to learn all of those things. So you can't be changing. Like maths is mathematics at the end of the day. Like you can go into any country and it's similar the same. In that way. So I'm a little confused why they need to change it so much if there's a set approach.
The other thing is, go on.
I don't think there is a set approach, because I've been teaching the year 6s like last week, and the way that they multiply fractions is like completely different. I think you might have seen it as well.
Yes,
like completely different to how we would do it.
Yeah,
and there's like way more steps. The actual calculations are way more confusing. But that's what they've been taught, and that's what they're kind of that's what they feel comfortable doing. Whereas if I showed them a method like we would do, like cross cancel and then multiply across, they find that confusing, even though it's technically more easier. Simple.
Yeah.
So, but this is the thing with schools,
constantly changing.
Where the research comes in, they don't want to teach children how to do things. They want to go back to that. Do they understand what's happening? Like when you think about long multiplication, we know the processes. And I don't think I was an adult before I understood exactly what's going on, the 10 and the 1s and all of that.
Yeah.
But for the children, if they can't explain to you, this is the 1s column, and we're multiplying by this, and this is the
I get what you're saying.
And it really frustrates me, is that because when you're working in year 6 and you're trying to pictures of things that are happening, and they're like, why is that? It's all moving, and they're not getting it. I don't actually care at this point. You multiply by this, and you multiply by this. Just do it.
When I was learning it, I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that You do this, 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 and this. You carry that. Put a 0 there, and you do the same thing. When I teach it now, I say the first row is top 2 numbers times by that. The second row is the top 2 numbers times by that, but because it's in the tens column, there's a 0 that shifts everything across. And I write out this times this is that line, this times this is that line, and you add them together. Yeah. And they get taught partitioning. Yes. It's exactly the same thing, but they don't see it as the same thing. They see it as something completely
everything
different.
Actually comes back to that partitioning place value sort of knowledge that I find a lot of kids in year 4 don't necessarily have year 4 or 5. They don't have the foundation knowledge work in that, and then they struggle with everything else after that because they don't understand how numbers actually work and fit together. So I find that if they know that well enough, you can actually teach them pretty much any method and they'll understand it.
So that comes to the curriculum, and I'm not asking a question here.
Go on.
Do you find that, and I'll say what I think after, but do you find that when you're going through the units, it's too quick? So you'd be on. Yeah. So this is where the foundation issue is gone.
So again, maths scheme of work. We move on to another topic or unit before, let's say, 25% of the class have really ingrained that into their knowledge. That's
super different from like in like Asia. They're really, really different. They try to get basically everyone in the class to actually understand.
Obviously that's the aim.
How much tuition do they have over there though? Because like if that wasn't the case, would we even have this place? Yeah. Well, people come to us because they're the 75% that don't understand it.
They do have that in some Asian countries, but then like somewhere like China, private tuition is banned anyway. So because they don't want people teaching their gender.
I don't know if you heard of that.
Well, they want to be, they go against the narrative.
I suppose like things like being able to do interventions and pre-teaching, that is just so crucial. But in the current time, I don't know how it's. I believe from other teachers who've been in the teaching for years, we just don't have the people now and the time to do as many interventions and pre-teaching as we would like to. Like I would love to be able to do a maths intervention every single day, but I don't have the people or the time.
Yeah.
So
sometimes and
they're crucial.
So crucial.
I had like one student, and she in year 6, and she was like the only one who wasn't in the intervention.
Yeah.
And then I was like, why is everyone in intervention?
I was going to say that's more of an intervention for her. She's in her own intervention. She's like, well, she can carry on and do something else, whereas the rest of the class are actually in a lesson.
But it's because I went through all of those like fractions, decimals, those foundational things. Made sure that our foundations were really strong.
To get a group of children who don't understand it, maybe have additional needs or anything like that, and they do need it,
I think, like you said,
in a more simple way, or more staggered or stepped, or more resources to help the manipulatives, to get that within a lesson when you're also teaching at the same time. It's very tricky.
It's a lot of things.
And I suppose that's a pressure that is on the teachers now to be able to achieve that. And you want to do it for those children, you want them all to leave that lesson or that unit of work being confident that if they got a test paper in front of them, they'd actually go, oh my gosh, I remember I learnt that. Okay, I might not get it right, but let me see if I can have a go. Rather than looking at it and going, what is that? Like, no idea what that question even wants me to do.
It sounds to me like it's a bit like the nurse issue. Like the teacher issue is quite similar because with nurses, they're doing more and more complex stuff all the time. So their job description is expanding.
Yeah.
And then with teachers, I don't know if it's expanded.
It's just, no, you're right. It's more boxes to tick, more things to do yourself. Yeah. Without the TA support in the classroom, you've got to do pretty much everything.
They are like gold dust. And I think, I think LSAs are amazing. Like,
they are. Our jobs are made so much easier with them there. And when they're not there,
they are, honestly,
it's a struggle.
We've thrown a lot of acronyms around today.
Sorry. Oh my goodness.
Can we just we know what, I know what TA is.
Teacher assistant, learning support assistant. So sorry,
the
learning
same sort of
support
things,
assistant. Same.
I know some of them, but I don't know all of them.
So they essentially have the same job role. I think it just differs from school to school what their title is essentially. So teaching assistant and a learning support assistant.
Yeah. So it's like, because at the moment, like the national conversation is very much revolved around teacher pay and nurses and that kind of thing, and unions.
So the conversation for today was going to be about whether teachers are underappreciated or not.
Yeah. Definitely underappreciated. Give us more pay.
But is it? But that's the thing. Is it just? It sounds to me like no matter how much more pay you get, like there's something innately difficult about the job that could be made easier. So is it also like the organisation of things, or is it like if it is changing quite a lot, if there aren't things put in place, if they're not helping you out more, then you're going to be unhappy no matter what.
We're just miserable people. I think there's two angles to that, right? One is the teacher's pay, and one is the money that is given to the school. Yeah. So what a lot of people don't see is that when schools are getting the same amount of pay, there's no equity in that, meaning that in my school, for example, we've got 75% pupil premium, meaning they're underprivileged and or special needs or whatever it is, and that school should be getting more in their budget. So forget me as a teacher. The budget for that school should be more, so we can employ more teaching assistants, we can get more resources. Whereas another school that's got 25% pupil premium should be getting a little bit less to balance it out, so it's more equitable in that sense. So that's not happening at the moment. So our school is getting the same money as that school, so they're getting their iPads and their MacBooks and things, and we're struggling to get another TA into the classroom for our SEN children who sat in the corner, and that's separate from the teacher pay, because our hours are made more difficult because of what we're expected to do. But if I had more teaching assistants and I had another specialist teacher in my classroom, my workload would be significantly reduced, and it might mean that I'm happy with my pay then. So do you get what I mean?
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, as a first year teacher, pay is pay to me. Like, I do it because I want to be a teacher. Like, if I earn what I earn. Obviously, if you want to give me more money, I'm not going to argue against it. I'm never going to turn that down. But for me, it's sort of work environment. Like, do I feel like I'm mentally satisfied at the end of the day, like I've done a good job, and that everyone is left knowing what they've, knowing what
with teachers
I've
and
done
nurses
is the best job I could have done. But then some days you don't leave because you just think, actually, if I had one more person, if I had a bit more support, I forgot to do that, or I forgot to do this. There is just a never-ending list.
They play out the teachers and nurses. We all care. We're not there for the money. We care. The nurses care. We care. They stay back. We stay back. We just care about what we do. We just want a bit more pay to do it.
Give me the money.
It's not.
I do think as your job role expands, obviously, you'll need to be paid to sort of compensate for those extra roles. But the thing is, obviously, as you I don't know. Then it seems to me like the thing that will make you the most happy would actually be having a lot more support.
Definitely, as a teacher, it's stressful that the work we can do the work. We understand the work, but it's when you're in class, when you're with those children, and you got 25% not getting it. What do I do with them? But with that extra support, that will take that mental, emotional pressure off, in a sense.
I know what you mean. Even after...
take those children who do get it out with an essay or whoever is available, to move them on, because they obviously can do it. So it's not even just about the children who don't get it; it's about the children who do get it, and then move them on, because they obviously get it. They need a challenge. They need
something. They need to be learning as well.
So it sort of is both aspects. It's we need to support those children who don't get it, but also those children who do get it. They need to be pushed.
Looking back now, on my primary school experience, I realised how ridiculous it was, because you had some kids in the class that couldn't read basically, and then you've got me who's sitting in the corner with Charles Dickens.
That is true.
So it's I did feel under challenged. So you by having support and the ability to sort of split up into different groups, you do, it's more beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
The students and teachers alike.
Yeah.
Although, obviously, like, this is all, like, it's very complex because, like, a school has a budget.
Yeah.
And it's
every
like,
school's obviously different.
It's so difficult for them to, like, they've got very little room to maneuver.
Yeah.
So, like, what I've noticed is, like, just going past schools generally, is they do seem much better resource than when I was young on the surface. But I don't know whether that actually, like, they've got nicer things, and, like, the playgrounds are nicer and everything sort of. But I'm not sure whether that translates into, like, better classroom learning.
I think what you're seeing on the surface of things, it's not that it's nicer, it's just kept up with modern times. So when you see an iPad in the classroom, it's not because the school's got money for Apple, it's just an app as a common utility.
Yeah.
When they've got pens, you don't say they've got new pens, they're privileged. They've got an iPad, it's not a privilege, it's just a standard protocol now.
We would have had a standard computer.
Yeah, we would have.
Yeah.
We had
Floppy disks.
the old Macs.
The white one.
Yeah. I think we had. When they were, like, quite cheap, like,
they came down in price.
Apple was, like, actually for relatively cheap brand at that point. And we had, like, Macs, but we only had, like, 5 computers or something like that. So for, like, 40 children.
Because our reading, like, in my current school, which I think is an amazing program, to be honest, but the program that they use on the Chromebooks is to test their reading levels. So it's all done using a computer. So, and obviously with COVID, where it went all online, the children are so tech savvy. They know exactly what they're doing. But obviously sometimes...
What's the program called? Might steal it.
Accelerated Reader.
What's it called?
Accelerated Reader. Yeah, it's very, very good. And that is what is used. The children essentially will read a book and it'll have a certain level based on a test that they do. If they get 100%, 80%, 90%, it means they can move up a level, stay on the same level, go down a level. It's really good. So yeah, like, without that, obviously that's completely different to when we were at school and how you just go have a go at this book or have a go at this book. It would just
be like, there's some books.
What
go, children.
Yeah, so like, that's amazing, I think, because you can actually assess a child's.
But the only
level.
thing with that is that I've noticed, because I did helped some kids read. Like, I've worked with a program called the Hackney Pirates, but I think they've changed their name.
No, it's still Hackney Pirates. I work with them.
Yeah, and then it is like the child has to go and pick a book and stuff like that. But then sometimes you've got to go, okay, well, maybe you will pick a slightly different book. Like, let's level it up a bit. Like, because you encourage them to go a bit more challenging. Because that's what I find a lot with kids. They might read a lot, but then how do you gauge how successful that reading is? Like, if the child isn't, like, because if it's self-directed, if it's completely self-directed, like, a lot of kids will go, a comic book, I'll just read that. Or they'll go for an easier book on purpose. Right?
Yeah.
Some kids will just go, okay, well, I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to read this, or I like this book, so I'm going to read this, and they'll just go up naturally. But then I find that a lot of kids just kind of stagnate in their reading because
some children are scared, even though if they're very capable and they need to move up a level, they're scared of the thickness of books as well. They're like, well, but I want to read more books, not just like, I want to read 3 small books rather than 1 big book. But there's a massive push I found in my training year. Halfway through it came in, and then definitely more so now, is comprehensive skills. So whatever they are reading, whether it is a comic book or I don't know, chapter books or whatever it is, it's actually, are they understanding what they're reading? So, like, are they taking it in? So rather than just reading the words, are they actually understanding what those words mean? Are there, can you think of a different word for that word in the book? Or, can you answer questions on it? Can you pick out the details? Or can you summarise what the last 2 pages that you just read were about, sort of thing? So there's a big push on comprehensive skills as well at the moment in schools, I think.
In some, this is a bit of a sort of restructure how our education system works, but in Asia actually, because I've obviously got a lot of connection to Asia, in Vietnam, China, Korea. They don't have like, so you know how the primary school teacher is a generalist in a way.
Yeah.
You've got to be very good at loads of different things, right? In Asia, the way it works is teachers are split into specialisms. So if you want to be a maths teacher or a primary school teacher, you do primary school maths, you do primary school English, you do a degree in that specific subject. And I would have thought that would seriously reduce like the pressure on a teacher, because you know
Is that
you're
how
planning.
private schools are?
No, they're still generalised.
No generalised.
No, it's very much how the education system works here.
But
we're sort of like, as in they'll take a teacher with a certain degree, I don't know, and then they do their PGCE, and it's very generalist, and you'll do that test for, you know, to check whether you understand your maths and your English and that kind of thing.
Maths GCSE.
But yeah, like I would have thought like the most effective way and most efficient way for teachers to sort of do better, and also to get the most out of students, and also reduce teacher workload, would be to make it sort of more of a specialist.
For knowledge-wise, yeah, but I think for primary, it's not all like, a lot of it is down to behaviour and like dealing with children that are that small.
Yes.
So it's not just the knowledge that's the.
No, and not just behaviour, but also the connection. I think at that level, they need that relationship, and you can't.
That's true.
If you're switching subjects, and especially in my school, I've learned that the hard way. That they really need that bond. They need that connection.
Yeah.
They can't be doing a different teacher. They can't manage that. They cannot cope with it.
But then they could get used to it. It's like,
wow,
you know,
How much
They need the consistency, don't they? They need the consistency. Like if every 45 minutes, every hour, they're swapping, and they're doing that like 8 times a day.
They can't pull away their maths book and get their reading books out without causing that transition alone is challenging enough in year 6. So to change teachers.
I can see it both ways.
The high levels of SEN as well in schools at the moment, like, change is not good for.
But going back to what you're saying about this in Asia, have you guys heard of Maths No Problem, the Singaporean approach?
Yeah.
So many years ago, there was a big hype on the Maths No Problem, and my head teacher at the time, she went out with other head teachers to Singapore because she wanted to adopt that approach. But what she learned when she was over there is that in Singapore, they come from a 6-parent family, meaning that this one child would have his parents when he goes home that care about his education. His grandparents also care about his education on his mom's side. His grandparents on his dad's side also care. So there's 6 parents on that one child that care. And in this, whereas here you got single family children, you've got parents that are not involved at all. Secondly to that, like you're saying, that we move on a lot, the units, in that approach, they stick with addition for a whole term.
Yes.
Even if you've got it, you might be doing it really fast. You're still doing it. You're teaching in the classroom. There's no push them on or let's go back. They just do that.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. Like, they make sure the whole.
Yeah, so they're there for a whole term. If you've got it, we're moving you to decimals now. We're moving to word problems. If you haven't got it, you hope that you're going to carry on for that whole term. And by the time you finish that term, it doesn't matter what kind of addition problem you're going to come up with, it's going to make sense to you. And that's embedded now. So that 75% that got it, they haven't got a chance to lose it. They're going to retain that information. And so we didn't adopt the approach because she thought, and it kind of the book and everything was brilliant. I thought it was wicked, but when she explained, I thought, you know what, you're right. We're going to chuck a book in front of them. It's not going to make a huge difference. They ain't got 6 parenting families. So that's another difference that we have here, that they don't have the cultural difference, I suppose.
Yeah. I was listening to the radio like yesterday, and they were talking about how like the culture matters in education, and like, for instance, because we talk a lot about, like, say, there's this idea of white privilege thrown around. But if you actually look at statistics on especially education,
it's the opposite.
Yeah,
it's the other way around.
Like, white boys, they're sort of most behind
statistically. Yeah.
Right.
I think it's like, so it's like black girls, sort of the fastest increasing level.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Education level, and I think it is culturally based. It's like you can see it in the parents that come, obviously, like tuition. You've got fairly motivated parents because they're actually taking that step of bringing child to tuition. But I've noticed like quite a lot of pressure from obviously Asian parents, and also, but also like parents from like West Africa, like you notice that they're very education focused. They want their children to do well, and whereas like I've noticed here it's a bit more laid back, like say white British parents, a bit more laid back when it comes to education. They're like, oh, they're just not really getting it. Like it's not that same level of panic. So I do think there is a cultural
on that. Actually, at my current school we did there was a writing moderation for my year group. It was year 4, and it was on Zoom, and I obviously chose 3 children's books that I thought were nearing expected for a year 4 level. And one of the ladies on that Zoom call said, like, she was complimenting this piece of work and just said it's amazing, it's going to be expected. Is he white British, the boy? And I didn't, I was like, yeah. But I thought nothing of that comment, but maybe that's the reason why she was asking, because actually, I don't know. Was she surprised? Yeah. I don't know, but I just sort of glazed over that question because I had no context to it. I didn't know anything, if there was a statistic or anything like that, but maybe that's the reason why.
You've got to bear in mind it's general. It's not like we've got a lot of people that come here that aren't in that category.
Yeah.
White, British, male, whatever.
Yeah.
But they're doing their work as if, it's a generalization.
With statistics, it's always that way. It's like there's a trend, but it isn't. There's
doesn't apply to
there's cases of like Chinese boy or Chinese girl not being that strong at maths. Like it happens. Like there's obviously
such a stereotype.
Yeah, it is true. It's true. Like because when I was younger, like the circles I mixed in, all the Chinese, obviously I'm half Chinese, like the Chinese kids that I knew were brilliant at maths and stuff like that. So I felt like the bad one at maths because I was like, oh no, I'm only half good at maths because I'm half Chinese. but I mean, I've got to say,
pressure though, right?
Yeah, but I've got to say, even with my mum, she's not by any means a mathematician or anything like that, but she would go, okay, we need to go through multiplying or something like that. So there is that, we'll sit down and then, because I was like struggling with multiplying. Funnily enough, I got dividing, but multiplying didn't make sense.
It's always one, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's like long division was really easy for me, but short division made no sense.
I mean, that carries through to now.
Yeah.
Like if I give you a complicated math problem, you'd be like, yeah, you just do this, this, and this. And if I gave you a multiplication, you'd be like, wait, let me.
Exactly. Yeah. What's 12 times 8? Yeah. So, I do think there's even because my mum's not that pushy, I'd say, as Asian parents go, but she I think she was more pushy than on average.
No, she cared. I suppose it's just she wanted you to,
So I do
demographics in schools and areas, and also like so much comes into
so much
influences it. I think. But yeah, if you've got people who care, I suppose it's good. Yeah.
How would you compare when you started teaching, like as a new teacher, to now, however many?
I was happy before. That when I got into it, that's just like.
Was it different to now?
Very different. Very different, and I don't know. Some of the things I've seen changes, right, is in terms of emotional needs. Has been a big rise in emotional needs of the children and their well-being and their mental state. When I first started, we didn't have a counsellor in school. Now we've got therapists in school. When I first started, like children were happy. That now I've got children trying to commit suicide. Talking about depression, which blows my mind, and they're like 10 years old and they want to they want to be depressed. When I was at school, we used to have homework policies, and now we have no homework policy, and then we had homework policy, and then we had no homework policy, which is blowing my mind. And the expectation has gone up as well, I think. I think the children need to know a lot more at a younger age. We've seen the curriculum change. The year 5 curriculum has gone down to the year 4, and the year 4s are doing the year 3. So it's all, they need to know a lot more. So how do you teach them a lot more without having that previous build-up?
I did find that I have noticed that like when I was young, we had like less to learn, but I felt like we learnt it better.
More in
like,
More in depth.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, and I think that's generally more effective, like because you will have more. You've got the odd few students who can just do all of it, but then
the ones that don't get it, they need that time. But like 6-digit numbers were going to millions was a year 6 thing when I first started, and now it's all the way down to year 5, and some year 4 starting on it as well. I don't know if you come across that, which is it's a huge shift. Like you're expecting these children to learn all of these things without the time given to them to learn it.
But yeah, you like. It's like when they had the first year of GCSE changes, and they sort of like, okay, well we've got like a transition year, but it was much harder GCSE, and then you have like the years before, they haven't really been prepped.
They haven't been prepped
because they haven't had that level of because they got significantly more difficult, and then they hadn't really been prepped on that sort of level of work, and then they've got to sort of like jump and to reach that level. But I don't think that's particularly effective. They need to build slowly towards something. So
build up.
It needs to be really cleverly like implemented. Like when you change an educational level in say year 6, then it needs to start.
It needs to be incremental from reception. Yeah, absolutely.
And then brought in slowly so they can adjust.
As opposed to boom.
Yeah, we've changed it. But yeah, I've noticed that seems to be a bit of a problem.
I think the other thing as well was the lockdown was I think it changed children.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to explain it in any other way.
Well, the formative years, right? So.
Yeah, it's that. And I suppose the best way I can explain it is to use my own child as an example. He started year 1. No, he started reception, but he never actually transitioned to year 1, and then he was started back into year 2, which is a SATs year.
So that's a big...
Yeah, so he's literally not had the social interaction, he's not had the transition process, he's not met the teacher. So when he got to year 2, it's a SATs year, and the teacher's got this pressure to get the SATs now, so you've got to do the SATs. So he missed 2 years of formal education, but expected to achieve the same standard as if he had. And I had the same experience in year 6. I've had some tough years the past few years, like these kids.
So gone from year 4 straight into year 6.
Literally exactly that, with that transition and that learning process. And I don't know, I think it did a lot to the children. It did affect them in a lot of ways, man. Like,
I think it affected everyone. Like it doesn't matter what year the child was in. It was like,
you're absolutely right.
I think I don't know if that was you probably know better because you taught a lot of year 1s and 2s.
Yeah.
Those are really very important years for them to build their literacy.
Absolutely.
So was it particularly bad for that year group? Or those year groups? Again,
it all it depends what their home learning looked like, to be honest, because obviously again it's very specific to what the parents could do at home. Because the pressure was sort of removed from teachers, I suppose, during that. Obviously, I wasn't teaching at that point, but just from what I've heard, it was very much, we want you to do this, but then the parents would have to be the ones who would have to find the time to do the phonics, find the time to do the reading, find the time to actually, explain something to their child. And if their child didn't want to do it, I suppose, how much does that parent or carer pressurise that? A parent is a parent, not necessarily a teacher. And a lot of parents sort of say, do you know what, home is home, school is school. So in primary school, where we do have homework now in actually it's across the whole school from reception to year 6 in our primary school, and you do get people who just say, no, we're not doing homework. That can wait until secondary school, because home is home and school is school. So I suppose it all depends, but that you do see a big difference. You can see a big difference in those children who probably did do the home learning, did get a chance to read, do phonics, all those incremental things that help a child in year 1, 2 and 3. Yeah.
So what do you prefer? Because you've done teaching and tutoring.
This will be my next question to both of you. Like,
what would you prefer?
And what are the differences as well?
I absolutely love the relationship I have with my class. Don't get me wrong, there's tough days, and I've voiced that there are tough days. And it's my training year compared to being a teacher is very different. So, I mean, I've got thoughts on, I think, the training year as a teacher. So I did a skip course. So I was in a school for 4 days a week, and then one day was a university day. That needs to be
much harder.
You need to have more stress, I think, in your training year, just for it to be more realistic. I think, towards the end of it, especially in the last term of a training year. But I was so excited to have my own class and have control over things. And I do love being a teacher, but it definitely it's more overwhelming than I thought it was going to be. But then weighing up with the rewarding side of things and the overwhelming, I think there is a higher weight to the rewarding side of things. I just hope it gets a little bit easier, and that teachers are heard when actually TAs, learning support assistants, are like gold dust, and they are so important. But so do I prefer teaching or teaching? They do.
You said you quite like one-to-ones.
I love doing one-to-ones or two-to-ones. Yeah, I just think because for me, that child either needs support because they don't get it. They need support in certain areas, or they want to achieve something, or their parents want to put them forward for 7+. And I would just prefer that one-to-one interaction rather than a group tutoring, I think, just because I love to see that progression sort of week on week with that one child, and you build a proper relationship with that one child or those two children. So I like a one-to-one tutoring as opposed to like a group tutoring, I think. But I think after a day of teaching as well,
you do. That's
what I found tough. I think that's what I found tough is after a day of teaching and then coming to tutor, I much preferred the more sort of one-to-one interaction.
You've been doing you've been doing tutoring probably longer than us, like.
Haven't I?
Yeah.
You invented tutoring.
Going back to the early century now.
You taught Socrates.
I'm really getting old, isn't it? I think, having done both, I think I prefer teaching. Only because I spend more time with the children. And like I said, I really like that connection.
Yeah, it's really important.
Even at tuition, the children that I've left now, like I really I watched them grow up. So the ones that I've gone, I've had a really good bond with them. And where you're here once a week, it's really tough to build that relationship. I do find it really tough, and it always gets better, obviously, as the time goes. But with teaching, like you're straight in there, and they're your kids. They call them my kids. They hate it. My children.
Yeah.
But you build that relationship straight away. You're there every day. And I say to the children in my classroom, I say, I spend more time with you than I do with my own kid at home, which is sad in a sense. But also, that's a relationship you have. That's how close it is. That's how close it gets. I see them 6 hours a day compared to see my own kid like an hour a day, if I'm lucky, if I get home on time. And with tuition, it's just 3 hours a week. So I do prefer the classroom. I mean, I love the kids at tuition as well, but
it's so important, that relationship. And like you said, with the emotional support that's needed now, again, I don't know when that's come in. Like, obviously I'm 6 months into the first year of teaching, and that relationship I've built over 6 months, but you instantly know when one of your children is not quite right. There is something going on, and it could be the tiniest thing. It could be a look they give you. It could be they forgot something that they bring with them every day, so they forgot their book bag, and that might be the tiniest thing. It breaks them. And they just So having that relationship with the children in your class is amazing, and that's the rewarding side of things. When you see someone like that one child who doesn't do their homework and they bring their homework in because they've enjoyed it, and they're like, oh my god, you've done. I make a big deal of it, and you want to celebrate every tiny thing that they do and achieve.
I think at tuition they're a lot more able as well, so they need a little bit less teaching and a lot more guidance, whereas in classroom you're actually teaching them, and you can see that instant gratification of they're getting it or they're not getting it, and you do it another day and they get it.
And teaching, well, I don't know, it just depends what group you've got with tuition, because either you get the people who really are struggling in school, or you get the people who are excelling.
I think that's where I like the one-to-one as well, because I know I know I can, it's easy to see what that child needs, whereas where if you do have a mixed group, that's where it can sometimes be.
Yeah, I think that's the hard thing, is like if you've got like 20 to, I mean, back when I was young, I was fairly certain there were like 40 children in the class, and I was like, how can the teacher really isolate issues and I don't know what's going on. Because there's things like we noticed that maybe the teachers don't notice because we work so closely with one.
Yeah.
But then obviously like it's a kind of different relationship in the end at the end of the day.
What about in terms of like comparing tuition to being in your school? Because I'm sure obviously you don't have a lot of paperwork and stuff to do with tuition.
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah. That's the best part of tuition.
Yeah, turn up, do it.
You show up, the work's there for you, the planning's done.
Yeah.
the
All
marks,
the behind the
scheme
scenes
is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The workload being a teacher is a lot. From planning to assessments to marking to data to all sorts.
Thinking about
Sorry. So, even the SEN needs now, which are more apparent in schools, that requires, one planning targets, the HCPs. That's a whole other conversation probably. But, it's a lot in schools. Like I said, the to-do list doesn't really ever end, but it's all necessary, I suppose.
It is all necessary.
It's all necessary, but it's finding efficient ways to do it and finding the time.
What do you think? So, because we talked a little bit about the role of the teacher in the classroom and that kind of thing. If you had to like give some tips to parents on like, let's say there's like 4 responsibilities that you think your child that you should try and sort of do with your child a bit more.
Read.
Reading.
Read at home. Yeah, 5 minutes. Whether it's 1 minute, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is. Whether you are doing, we always say, obviously, I know it's tough, and everyone has different home lives. But even if we say to parents, if you're washing the dishes or cooking the dinner, just say, can you just read me a page of your book while you're doing that? Because you're still hearing them, and you can can hear when they are struggling with a word. So then we call it ghost reading. So like, they read.
I'm just imagining loads of things.
We call it ghost reading. So yes, the child will read a book, come to a word, they struggle with it. Obviously, you can hear that they can't say that word. You'll tell them that word, then they repeat it. So it's essentially you're reading without reading as a parent or carer. And we say whether it's with a big brother, big sister, an auntie, whoever it may be, 5 minutes a day. There's a really good, I can't remember off the top of my head, there's an amazing statistics again, but how a child who reads 5 minutes a day, don't quote me on this, 5 minutes a day, will basically do a lot better in life than a child who reads
they say it's
twice a week. I don't know. There's a really good.
There's like key ages. It's like between 3 and 6 or whatever. Where you.
That's nice.
Obviously, like the first 2 years of life are they're the most important. Like like nutrition and all that, and stimulation and
they call it
learning how to speak and all that. But then from like 3 to 6, you've got those are like key ages to sort of set the foundations for reading.
Mine would be reading, and also unpicking how your child's day went. Like speak to your child from
get a conversation
going. Like obviously don't pry too much so it winds them up. See, but in schools in my school in particular and the previous school I was in, we such a big push on zones of regulation. Like understanding your child. So obviously that's quite a new thing, I think, the zones of regulation within schools. Thing, yeah. So for parents, if they can do any research on zones of regulation, so for example, when we do the register in the morning, I'll say, good morning, blah, 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 and they'll give me their name. They'll say, Katherine, red. So they'll give me the zone that they are in that morning. And then or they might say, Katherine, green. And then
hopefully no one says red.
Throughout the day, then it'll be my responsibility, and then they move their name to their zone. And it could be the tiniest thing, but you have to understand in that child's world, that's a massive thing. So it could be the fact that someone broke their pencil, like that, but to them, that's really upset them. So you have to just understand the zones. I think as a parent, obviously they're your child, so they probably know that when they're not regulated, what emotions they're feeling. But I think talk to your child about sort of what they've learned, unpick any emotional things that might have happened during the day, talk about it, ask them what they've learned, because that's retrieval as a teacher. What have they learned? Reading and
that's always something I like to do in tuition sessions. Like, what were you doing in school today? And what did you learn? And then they go, I don't know, I can't. I think I did maths.
Writing.
That's usually the answer.
So it's like reading and sort of zones of regulation and understand, because that's what we use in school, in PSHE lessons, and refer to if a child is not feeling great. Basically, that's what we use.
So I got two things. So I got 2 things. Was it reading and then zones of regulation?
I think reading and zones of regulation. I've got issues about that, but I'll come back to that. I think speaking in general, like just opening that communication up. Children love talking to their parents, like literally love spending time with their parents, and that's all it is, just spending time with them, talking to them, having a conversation. The other thing is times tables, fluency in times tables. Such a big one, such a simple one. Fluency in times table is so key.
How did you learn your times tables?
Writing it and reading it, writing.
Or do you know your times tables? I think I just listened to like a tape that just
songs help, we do songs. One.
I literally had a tape that did that, and then I think I did like a week on it, and then I was like, I know my times tables.
Again, another program which is really good for you is Times Table Rock Stars.
Yeah.
And have you heard it? Oh yeah, it's amazing. Children love that.
Make it fun.
Make it fun.
Gamify.
It's got to be fun.
So times tables, and then. So a fourth.
I'd say go out, go out and explore the world.
Yeah, I was going to say that sort of
day trips.
Day trips. Just even like some of our kids don't know what a gutter is, what the sewers are like. Just go out, step outside the door, and look around the world. Explore the world and see.
Involving your children in tasks is.
Yeah, there are so many ridiculous things that you expect them to know that they don't.
Like learn how to make a pot of tea or.
No, even simpler things like knowing what a gutter is. Or
I did a lesson in my training year, and it was around Go and Look on the Three Bears. And one criticism was, how do you know those children know what porridge is? And I went, oh my gosh.
Just assume they know, but they
I just assume they know what porridge is. And that's a really simple thing. But half the class probably didn't know what porridge was, didn't know what I was talking about, half the thing. It's just, but it's small things that you just you can't assume anything. So it's going out and seeing
the world, live a little.
Nature.
A lot of the ones that we teach, the kids that we teach, the parents don't actually take them to shops or anything like that. All they know is hopefully times tables and that sort of stuff. But if you were to give them
they know the times table, grateful, but they don't.
But if you're doing 11 plus or comprehension, and there's references to the sea or something, they just don't. They've never heard of it.
That's that.
And that's where reading comes into it as well. You can read, give them an educational book, like a book about oceans, or something like that. And some children are really good at picking those books out anyway. Because they've I've learned that in school. I'll actually read this book that sort of links it all together. Whereas obviously some children will prefer to go for the picture books or the comic books, and that's fine. But then I suppose it's getting them out into
that range, doesn't it?
Into the world,
Reading.
Okay. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
Because I've noticed even
Got a good one.
You win the episode.
Winner.
yeah, I've noticed even with like say children with they've got fantastic sort of foundations in mathematics and probably English too, and like they know a lot of words. But then when you actually ask them about like experiences, it's very
limited.
Yeah, it's very limited.
Go to the zoo, you know.
Yeah.
Some animals. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, like but even just like involving your child in some of the everyday things like cooking and
cooking, shopping,
Pass me the
cleaning
flour.
stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah.
What's the flour? That powdery thing is the flour. You're right. You are right. Just little things every day to do.
Yeah.
So important. I get the children in my class do jobs all the time for me. I'm like, but it's purely because I'm lazy. Like, can you use hand
That's what I used to do.
You don't have a TA. What do you have
Like,
for
can
the
you put out
children?
the office?
Well, it creates independence, isn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely,
Like
yeah.
you trust them enough to do a task.
Also,
for
it
you.
builds their confidence. Like,
Yeah.
I if there's a child, I'm like, oh, can you just go to the office? 'Cause, and ask the office if they have some more glue sticks. But actually, it's getting them talking to someone else who's not me or their friend.
Like
on the
sometimes it's
table.
amazingly simple. So I had this kid who was really misbehaving in Korea, because I went there for a year, and he was misbehaving a bit. But then I gave him just the task of like carrying some of my
they
stuff
love
to the
it.
next
They love
classroom and stuff like
responsibility.
that. So you're just like trusting him to do something.
They do. They love responsibility. Children, like they love to help. Well, most children.
Yeah, because it makes them feel
to help.
They feel like they're an adult.
They
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
They
exactly.
really do. That is one thing. I just think.
I think that would be my fifth thing. Is like
That would be a
independence.
thing.
Like breed independence early on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing I absolutely love with teaching is just like building their self-confidence and their self-esteem and their independence. Like, obviously teaching them all their lovely subjects is so important, but also like you really do see them grow as, as people. And, that's where behaviour management and things like that come in, where you have to explain to a child the rights and the wrongs, and there's ways of saying things and there's ways of doing things, and it's okay to feel like that, but actually this is how it's better to deal with it. And if a child's not feeling very confident, let's hype them up a bit. Like, your hair looks amazing today, or but I love all that. Like,
we
would
are
you like to
pastoral
read? You're
workers.
really good at reading.
We are building them up, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's not just the academics. We are building them up. We are.
Yeah, I'm like that cheerleader, honestly. They're probably like, go away. Like, leave me alone.
Yeah, it's funny how
Half the
important.
time.
It's funny how important that like 5 or 10 minutes of just like relaxing and small talk and playing a game or doing something like that.
Yeah, especially if they don't get that
important
at
it is.
home.
Yeah.
They might not get that at home. They might not get that conversation. So
Well, it's like anyone, if you say, how was your day? And stuff like that.
Fine.
Like it doesn't
Yeah.
like
Doesn't take a lot.
It doesn't take a lot to make someone's day better. And like a lot of the kids, they might not, they don't get that. Someone asking how are you doing today?
Yeah.
Like, what have you done today? Like,
Also,
what have you learned?
one thing is remembering, like if a child tells you something that they're doing at the weekend, or it's my hamster's birthday. To you as a teacher, you're like, okay, I've got something really important to do, but then you're like, amazing. And then on Monday morning, I'm like, how was your hamster's birthday? But they literally like they are like, oh my god, you remembered. Like they love that. So yeah, again, that was something that was definitely advice given to me in my training year, is those tiny things are so important. Yes, them getting
It's like the child
multiplications correct is really important, but those are the things that actually that they'll probably remember when they go home.
That's actually the child's version of opening up.
Oh my god, yeah. But they I love it. Yeah.
My head teacher once said to me, every child should think they're your favourite.
Right.
It's something I do. And every child in my class, they do think I'm his favourite. Like, none of you are my favourite.
Yeah.
But
it's so true. Yeah.
And just go back to what you were saying before this. We do the register.
Yeah.
I missed the register one morning, and I always say good morning when I say it. This kid tracked me down at lunchtime. He goes, say good morning to me, sir. Say good morning to me. Like, good morning.
It's 3 o'clock. Good morning, Dad.
And I go home.
Yeah.
I see these little things are such a big deal for them. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely find. Yeah, like even if you've got like limited time. So we obviously have like
Very
an hour.
limited time.
So
yeah.
it's an hour. You got like 50 minutes to teach.
Yeah.
Those are amazingly complicated, like algebra, like simultaneous equations to like a 6-year-old. No, wait.
Year 6, year 5, year 6. Yeah.
That wouldn't be my class.
You still,
Quite like it, to be fair.
You still need to have a
Rapport with.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
to start it off, so just start with a little bit of small talk, even if it doesn't seem important to you.
Small talk in a game, usually, is what we do.
Yeah.
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 Shake out
Cool.
the cobwebs.
You can wrap it up there.
Yeah.
I found this really interesting.
Yeah, it was good.
Sorry, we've gone woo, haven't we?
I definitely felt
up, down.
I definitely felt the passion. That was.
That's
Yeah.
That's ultimately.
That's
isn't it?
Yeah.
There's frustration and passion, and it's like finding a happy
Merge them
medium.
together.
Yeah.
They go together though.
Yeah.
It's like
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for taking time out of your
You're
half term to
Thank you.
spend an hour with us.
it was very informative.
Good.
Thank you for having us, guys. It
Thanks.
was nice.